So, where are some of the best places to walk? It's nice to walk and end up at somewhere quite historical. Does anyone remember a hot summer's day in August 1984? This was when a sudden blaze devoured a magnificent mansion that stood in the outskirts of Ruislip Woods. It had been standing there for almost 80 years. It was called Ruislip House. And here to tell us the whole history of the place and what's happened to it since is Evan Panagopoulos, who is a historical enthusiast and tour guide. Hello, Evan.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on today.
It's a pleasure. So I have had the privilege of looking at these fantastic archive pictures of this, mansion in its full glory. I'm calling it Ruislip House. Was it right? Was that its name?
Actually, no. Ruislip House was not its name. In its latest iteration, so when it burned down in 1984, it was known as the Battle of Britain House.
Oh, the Battle of Britain House. Okay, cool. So for obvious reasons. So tell us the history, as much as you know of it, about this house.
It has a very long history that starts around the turn of the 20th century. So we know that these lands at Ruislip Woods at that time belonged to King's College, Cambridge. They were the leaseholder, so to speak. And there is record that at that time the leased what was known as Northwood Plantation, and I don't know why it was called a plantation, but at any case, it was farmland, and it was leased out to a farmer from Denmark or Germany whose name was Josef Kohn. So he's the first person that moves into this area. At that point, there is no mansion. There is just a farmhouse and farmland, and he moves in, and he names that farm Horsens. And Horsens is a city in Denmark at the Jutland Peninsula. So the assumption is that they were either of German or Danish origin, and they are the first settlers of that area.
And he got permission to extend the house and turn it into the glory that it became. Is that right?
Well, that is, I cannot confirm or deny that. They certainly kind of start building it up at that time. A very important personality is, ostensibly, is his wife, Mrs. Josef Kohn. She goes by Mrs. Josef Kohn. Perhaps her first name is Emily. And she's probably well known as a sensation of the turn of the 20th century because she might be the one who introduced a series of health exercises for ladies, which she imported from her native Denmark.
And I love that. Keep fit with ladies.
Yes.
And she started that. I'm going to race you forward because the house, like many other big houses during the war, were taken over. It was actually taken over by the Foreign Office, wasn't it? Am I right? It was occupied by the Foreign Office, and that's when they started training secret agents there. Am I right?
That is correct. I mean, after various ownerships throughout the 20s and the 30s, and some very interesting and colorful characters staying there, at the outbreak of the war, it's been taken over by the Ministry of Works, requisitioned because it was vacant at the time, and it was utilized as basically as a secret training base for Secret Service.
And am I right in thinking, Evan, that because you couldn't access it, so locals, no one had any idea what was going on inside this house?
I suppose not for quite some time, because it was a private home at the time. It had been converted to a grander mansion. I suppose locals didn't have any access to it. So nobody knew what was going on inside that area of the woods. So yeah, it was quite secret. It was a great location for the Secret Service and the Office of Strategic Services to put something together there.
And at the end of the war, because of the house's involvement in training secret agents, etc., the RAF stepped in and they thought they would keep it for the local Ruislip community, and that's when it became a mansion to commemorate the Battle of Britain, and that's why it's got its name. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. I guess when the RAF stepped in after the war, there were still no everything was still top secret. Whatever was happening during the war had remained top secret, and it only started kind of emerging after the declassification of certain OSS and Secret Service files in the late 70s, and indeed after the end of the Cold War in the late 90s. So when the RAF stepped in, actually not much would have been known about the usage of the house as a secret training base. Nevertheless, they stepped in, and they needed a space to commemorate the Battle of Britain, and the house was available because it was not, the war was over, it was not requisitioned anymore, and they hatched the plan to kind of fund part of the investment with their own funds and perhaps give up the rest to public subscription.
And may I ask, Evan, where did your fascination with this place begin? Because you didn't know it when it was in all its glory. You only stumbled upon the ruins. Is that after the fire, which we will talk about in a moment? You didn't know anything about it, did you?
I had no idea. I didn't even know where it was. And it's very close to where I live in Ruislip Woods, which I love. As it's a natural reserve of stunning beauty, and I love walking there with my family. And I just happened upon a record of it through articles, old articles from local history societies, etc. And there was an old map from a leaflet from the 70s, kind of highlighting its general location, and I had to wade through brambles and a thicket on a warm summer day and ferns up to my waist in order to stumble upon these steps, which is all that's left from the mansion.
Really?
Emerging through the foliage like some sort of...
Wow. And so you stumbled up on the only bits of ruin that were left with the steps, and then you were determined to find out more. In fact, there may be people listening to us who do remember that fire in 1984. But what is fascinating is, after a lot of research, you actually found a fireman who helped to put the fire out. Is that right?
Well, that has to do with, I started by writing an article which, through the course of the last 2 years has been read thousands of times. And I guess many local people, once they saw someone kind of investigating the sites, came forward with their own stories. And that community involvement has been amazing, astonishing. So I put together a small site and a Facebook group, and I invited local people. And all of a sudden, I have local people, such as this gentleman, the fireman, who came up forward and said, yes, I remember it. I was out with my friends and family and at a barbecue, and we received a call to the house that we were in, and I was asked to go down and, put out the fire. And
it was burnt to the ground. Does anyone know how it caught fire?
Well, I guess, this is one of the several kind of avenues, lines of investigation. I would have to look at, for example, fire brigade records, etc., to see if there is a report from the time. But the consensus is that it was under renovation at the time, and something that has to do with a wallpaper stripper on a very hot summer day in August 1983, 1984, and then a spark or a cigarette, as it was at the time, or just the heat, I guess, ambient heat.
It's so sad because you managed to find these incredible aerial shots, absolutely stunning house, and I love the fact your research, you've discovered stories and you're still looking for stories. So anyone that remembers this, what is known as the Battle of Britain House in Ruislip Woods, if anyone remembers it, you've already discovered one woman who had her wedding reception there, and a man who went there in the 60s under the Official Secrets Act and will never tell you what he was doing there. These are extraordinary stories.
It is truly fascinating, and you know what? This is the main reason I'm doing this for, because every layer I peel, there's someone coming forward and surprises me with what. I had this lady from France calling me the other day, and she said that her dear mother, she's passed away now. She was an au pair there during the 60s, and she spent 2 years there keeping a diary in French. And she was reading through it, and there were so many mentions of the house, and she visited with her family and with that lady as a young child, Ruislip over and over again. This is how great memories she had from the house. And we found she found in her diary a leaflet, advertising leaflet of the time, incredibly rare, of the Battle of Britain House, being advertised as a residential college with a map and, all the classes listed and the prices and the dates. And it's this kind of like, archaeology, so to speak, in brackets, that fascinates me, that we can still find artifacts that bring history back to life.
And I'm so with you on this. I'm fascinated by, existing houses and what went on inside them. I'm absolutely fascinated, let alone just to discover, some ruins. You go up these steps and you think, what the hell was here at the top? And you've filled in a lot of the blanks. In fact, the picture I'm looking at is the steps that are still there, all overgrown. In fact, you actually say there were sculptures of lions in the garden that had been taken there and put there from the Far East. Nobody knows why they were there or indeed where they are now. So if anyone happens to live around Ruislip and you've seen very old lion sculptures in place somewhere, maybe they were from the Battle of Britain House. It is so lovely to speak to you, Evan. I love the way you sort of unpicked the whole story and you're still finding out more. If people want to go to your website, can you give us your website?
So I have a dedicated website for this. It's battleofbritainhouse.org. And you can go there. I keep on updating it with every aspect of my research, and very soon I'm going to have a dedicated area for locals or anyone around the world who wants to contribute their memories, which are still out there unrecorded. So we can create a collective kind of memory of this kind of wonderful mansion that is there no more.
I love that you're doing that. I'd love it if any of our listeners can contribute. So that's your website, and you do tours. You do local tours, don't you?
I do. This is a bit of a side project for me because it's very close to home, but I run a company called explorabilia.co.uk, and I do tours, fascinating tours that have to do with abandoned spaces, obscure and forgotten histories, architecture, and I weave together narratives, and I kind of resurrect those forgotten stories and locations, and I do both local and international tours if you're interested in that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I love the amount of research you've done. I love what you focus on. So if you want to find out more about Evan, then you can go to his website, explorabilia.co.uk. And we were talking to Evan Panagopoulos about the Battle of Britain House.